Colorado, 1885. There is a mathematics to loss and another one for living. One is a simple subtraction. The other is a calculus too complex for most men to solve. Elias Thorne had stopped trying to solve it 5 years ago. He had accepted the subtraction. One day, there was Martha. The next, there was not. The world had simply taken her away, and the answer was a silent house and a bed that was always cold on one side. He lived with the answer. He woke before the sun, not because he loved the dawn, but because the darkness held too much memory. He made coffee, 1 cup, the sound of the spoon against the ceramic loud in the kitchen. He pulled on his boots, the leather worn into the shape of his solitude, and went out to meet the day. His dog, a gray-muzzled shepherd mix named Gus, was his only shadow. The ranch was too big for one man. Martha had always said it was a place for a family, for the sounds of children to fill the high-ceilinged rooms of the house he'd built with his own hands. Now the silence was its only occupant. It was a good ranch, nestled in a valley that caught the morning sun just right. The creek ran clear and cold. The pastures were rich. But a good ranch needed more than one pair of hands. It needed a heart. And Elias's heart was just a muscle that kept him moving, nothing more. He had stopped expecting. It was the easiest way to live. You did the work, you ate your meal, you slept. You did not ask for more because more was what could be taken away. He was mending a fence line on the western edge of his property when he saw it. A broken-down wagon on the county road, a thin ribbon of dust and hope that ran past his land. It was a common enough sight. People heading west, chasing a dream that usually soured before they reached the mountains. He usually paid them no mind. It was not his concern. But this time was different. A horse was down in its traces, and a small figure was struggling to calm its partner. Another, even smaller figure stood by the wagon wheel, watching. Elias squinted against the hard afternoon sun. It was a woman and a boy, alone. He told himself to turn back to his fence. He had posts to set before evening, but his feet did not move. Gus sat beside him, whining softly, his head cocked towards the road. Elias sighed, the sound a small puff of dust in the dry air. He had not wanted company. He had not wanted complication. But decency was a habit he hadn't managed to break. He picked up his tools and began the slow walk down the slope toward the road. As he got closer, he could see the details. The wagon was old, its canvas patched in a dozen places. The remaining horse was a weary-looking beast. The woman had her back to him, her voice low and steady as she spoke to the panicked animal. She was young. Her dress was faded but clean, and she moved with a competence that surprised him. "Easy now?" she was saying. "Easy, boy. It's all right." Elias stopped a few yards away. "Looks like you've got some trouble." The woman turned. She was not startled. Her eyes, the color of a summer sky just before a storm, met his directly. She was younger than he'd thought, maybe 20 or 21. Her face was smudged with dust, but it was a face of quiet strength. A boy of about 10 stood beside her, his expression a mixture of fear and defiance. "Axle split," she said, her voice as direct as her gaze. "Came down hard in that rut. Broke the horse's leg, I think." Elias looked at the downed animal. Its eyes were wide with pain. He knew that look. There was no fixing a break like that. He felt a familiar dull ache behind his ribs. Subtraction. Always the subtraction. "I'm sorry," he said. It was all he could offer. She nodded once, a sharp, accepting movement. "I know." She looked at the boy. "Tom, get the water bucket." The boy didn't move. He just stared at the horse. "It's my fault," the boy whispered. "I was holding the reins." "It was nobody's fault," the woman said, her voice softening just enough to be kind, but not enough to be pitied. "It was the road's fault. Now, the bucket. The boy finally moved, scurrying to the back of the wagon. Elias looked from the woman to the broken axle. It was a bad break, not something you could patch on the side of a road. "My name is Elias Thorne," he said. "My ranch is just over this rise." "Clara May," she replied, "and my brother Tom. We're obliged for you stopping." She did not offer a last name. He did not ask for one. He walked over to the horse. It took him only a moment to confirm what he already knew. He straightened up and met her eyes. He didn't have to say a word. She read the answer in his face, the way a sailor reads the sea. Her chin lifted slightly. "I see." She took a deep breath. "I'll have to trouble you for the use of your rifle, Mr. Thorne, and a shovel." The request was so practical, so devoid of the hysterics he might have expected, that it threw him off balance. She was asking him to help her do the hard thing, not asking him to do it for her. "I'll take care of it," he said. "It's my horse," she said simply. "It's my job." He looked at her for a long moment. He saw no pride in her eyes, only a sense of duty. He nodded slowly. "All right. But the wagon, you can't stay here. I can haul it up to my barn. I might be able to fix that axle, but it'll take a few days." "We can't pay you," she said, the words flat and honest. "We have enough to get to Oregon, and that's all." "I'm not asking for pay," he said, "but I can always use another pair of hands. You can work it off. There's an old bunkhouse you can use." She considered his offer. Her gaze was unnervingly steady, as if she were weighing not just his words, but the man himself. Finally, she gave another one of those short, decisive nods. "That's fair. We'd be grateful." He dealt with the horse while she kept the boy busy at the wagon. It was a grim task, but necessary. He felt the weight of it, as he always did. Another life subtracted from the world. When he was done, he hitched his own workhorse to the front of their wagon and began the slow task of pulling it up the hill to his ranch. Clara May and Tom walked behind. They did not speak. They just walked, two small, determined figures against a vast and indifferent landscape. The bunkhouse was little more than a shed, but it was clean and dry. He left them with a lantern and some blankets. "There's a pump by the main house. Kitchen door's unlocked if you need anything." "Thank you, Mr. Thorne," she said. He just nodded and walked back to his own house, Gus trotting at his heels. The silence of his kitchen seemed heavier than before. He had invited complication onto his land. He had invited noise into his quiet. He told himself it was just for a few days, just until the axle was fixed. The next morning he rose at his usual hour. As he stepped out onto his porch, a cup of coffee in his hand, he was surprised to see another cup already sitting on the railing. It was steaming in the cool morning air. He looked toward the barn and saw her already at work, checking on her remaining horse. She had not asked. She had not made a show of it. She had simply done it. He picked up the cup. It was black, just the way he liked it. How could she have known that? He supposed it was just a lucky guess. He drank it, the warmth spreading through him in a way his own coffee rarely did. He spent the morning in his workshop, wrestling with the broken axle. It was splintered badly. He would have to forge a new brace for it. It was slow, difficult work. Around mid-morning, the boy, Tom, appeared in the doorway. He stood there silently, watching. "Can I help?" Tom finally asked, his voice small. "You know anything about a forge?" Elias asked, not unkindly. "No, sir, but I can learn. I can fetch things." Elias looked at the boy. He saw the same steady gaze as his sister. "All right," he said. "Pump the bellows, slow and steady." The boy worked. He was clumsy at first, but he listened. He did exactly as he was told. By noon, the workshop was filled with the rhythmic sound of the bellows and the ring of Elias's hammer on hot metal. It was a sound he hadn't heard in a long time, the sound of work being shared. Clara May appeared with 2 plates of food. Simple fare, biscuits and beans, but it was hot. She handed one to him and one to her brother. "You need to eat," she said. It was not a question. They ate in silence, the three of them, in the dusty light of the workshop. It felt strange, not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar, like trying on a coat that had belonged to another man. Over the next few days, a new rhythm established itself on the Thorn Ranch. Elias worked on the axle with Tom as his quiet apprentice. Clara May, without needing to be told, found work to do. She weeded the vegetable garden that Elias had let go to ruin since Martha's passing. She mended a stack of his work shirts, the stitches so fine, and even they were nearly invisible. She cleaned the windows of the main house until the light poured in, chasing out the dusty shadows. She never entered the house without his permission. She would knock softly on the kitchen door frame. "Mr. Thorne, I noticed the chickens need watering." Or, "Mr. Thorne, I baked an extra loaf of bread, if you'd have it." Each small act was like a stone dropped into the still pond of his life. The ripples spread further than he could have imagined. The house began to smell of bread instead of dust. The garden began to look like a place of life instead of neglect. He found himself listening for the sound of her footsteps, for the low murmur of her voice as she talked to Tom or the horse. He didn't have to do this. He could have fixed the axle in a day if he'd pushed himself, but he found reasons to slow down. The metal needed to cool just so. He needed a specific part from town. He was lying to himself, and he knew it. He did not want them to leave. The trip to town was a necessity. He needed a new bolt for the wheel assembly. He took the wagon, and Clara May asked if she and Tom could ride along to get some supplies of their own. He agreed. The town of Harmony was a single dusty street, lined with false-fronted buildings. As he pulled up in front of Albright's general store, he felt a strange sense of awareness. He was an older man, a widower, with a young woman and a boy. He could feel the eyes on them. The curtains in the windows of the houses twitched. Mr. Albright stood on his porch, wiping his hands on his apron. He was a good man, but he had a hunger for news that was as deep as a winter well. "Elias," Albright said, his eyes flicking from him to Clara May. "Didn't expect to see you in town, and with company." "Wagon broke down on the county road," Elias said, his voice flat. "This is Clara May and her brother Tom. I'm helping them with a repair." "A kindness," Albright said, though his tone suggested it was more than that. "A real kindness." Clara May met Albright's curious gaze without flinching. "Mr. Thorne has been very generous," she said. "We're working to repay the debt." Her directness seemed to disarm the store owner. He just grunted and led them inside. While Elias was getting his bolt, he saw Daniel Harding enter the store. Harding was the son of the wealthiest rancher in the county. He was handsome, confident, and knew it. His eyes landed on Clara May immediately. Elias watched as Harding approached her. He couldn't hear the words, but he could see the smooth smile, the easy charm. He saw Clara May listen politely, her expression unreadable. He saw her shake her head, a small, firm gesture. He saw Harding's smile falter for a second before he recovered, tipping his hat and walking away. Something hot and unfamiliar coiled in Elias's gut. It felt like anger. It felt like possession. He had no right to feel either. On the ride back to the ranch, the silence in the wagon was different. It was tense. "What did Harding want?" he finally asked, his eyes on the road ahead. "He offered me a job," she said, "cooking for his father's ranch hands. Said it came with a room for me and Tom. Good pay." "It's a good offer," Elias said, his voice stiffer than he intended. "I told him I already had a job," she said quietly. He didn't know what to say to that. He just clucked to the horses, the wagon wheels creaking in the quiet of the afternoon. He had known from the moment he walked down that hill that this was temporary. He had known they would leave. He had told himself that. But knowing something and feeling it were two different things. He was beginning to feel it, like the phantom limb of an old wound beginning to ache before a storm. What country are you listening from today? Drop it in the comments. It means everything to know where this voice is reaching. It's a small thing, I know, but it connects us across all the miles and all the different kinds of silence. Now let's get back because Elias Thorne is about to figure something out. He's about to understand that some debts can never be repaid because they aren't debts at all. They are gifts. The axle was finished the next day. He had run out of excuses. He fitted the new brace, hammered the bolt into place, and greased the wheel. It was strong. It would hold all the way to Oregon and beyond. The work was done. He stood back, wiping his hands on a rag, and looked at his work. He should have felt a sense of satisfaction. Instead, he felt a profound emptiness. He had fixed their wagon. He had fixed their path away from him. That evening, the three of them ate dinner together at the table in his kitchen. It was the first time she and Tom had eaten in the main house. She had insisted, as a final thank you. She had cooked a stew, and the house was filled with the warm, savory smell. It felt like a home. It felt like a memory of a life he used to have. After the meal, Tom went outside to check on the horse. Elias and Clara May sat in the growing twilight, the silence between them thick with unspoken things. "The wagon is ready," he said finally, his voice sounding rough in his own ears. "You can leave at first light if you want." "I know," she said. She was looking down at her hands, which were folded on the table. They were strong hands, capable but not rough. He wanted to say something. He wanted to ask her to stay, but the words caught in his throat. What could he possibly offer her? A life with an old man on a struggling ranch? A life of hard work and little reward? He was more than 20 years her senior. The arithmetic of it was stark and unforgiving. It was not sensible. He pushed his chair back and stood up. "I'll be on the porch." He went outside and stood by the railing, looking out at the mountains turning purple in the fading light. Gus came and rested his head on his boot. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. He heard the kitchen door open and close, and then she was standing beside him. They stood there for a long time, not speaking. The first stars were beginning to appear. "The wheel is strong," he said, just to break the silence. "It will hold." She turned to look at him, and in the dim light, he could see the sheen of unshed tears in her eyes. Her composure, the thing that had so impressed him from the very first moment, was finally cracking. "I was hoping it would take longer," she whispered. The words hit him with the force of a physical blow. They were a confession, an admission. She had not been waiting to leave. She had been hoping to stay. Everything he had assumed, everything he had told himself was wrong. He could not speak. He could only look at her, at this young woman who had brought life back into his silent world, and feel the full, terrifying weight of what was happening. It was not subtraction. It was something else entirely, something he had forgotten how to calculate. That night, sleep would not come. He sat in the dark living room, in the armchair that had been Martha's favorite, with the dog at his feet. The house was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. It was a silence filled with possibility, and that was somehow more frightening than the empty silence he was used to. He did the arithmetic. He was 47. She was 21, a 26-year difference. By the time she was his age now, he would be an old man, over 70, if he was even still alive. He pictured her, still vibrant and strong, tied to a failing old man. It was not fair. It was not right. He had nothing to offer her. The ranch barely broke even most years. He had calluses on his hands and sorrow in his heart. Daniel Harding could give her a fine house, pretty dresses, a life of ease. All he could give her was more work, more hardship. He thought of Martha. What would she think? He could almost hear her voice, gentle but firm. Elias, you stopped living when I died. That's not what I wanted for you. But even her memory couldn't make the numbers make sense. He was a fool to even consider it. It was a kindness to let her go. He would let her follow her dream of Oregon. He would let her find a young man, someone who could give her the life she deserved. He would close this door himself before the hope could truly take root. He would protect her from his own foolish, selfish heart, and he would protect himself from the pain of another loss, because he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that watching her ride away would be a subtraction he could not survive. He made his decision. In the morning, he would wish them well. He would give them some money for their journey. He would be sensible. He would be kind. He would be a coward. He must have drifted off in the chair, because the next thing he knew, the gray light of dawn was filtering through the windows. He felt a stiffness in his bones and a hollowness in his chest. He stood up and went to the kitchen to make the coffee. 1 cup. As he was standing by the stove, waiting for the water to boil, a small figure appeared in the doorway. It was Tom. The boy's face was pale and set. "Mr. Thorne?" he asked. "Tom," Elias acknowledged, his voice thick with sleep. "Are you sending us away?" the boy asked, his voice trembling slightly but his gaze as direct as his sister's. The question was a blade, sharp and clean. Elias felt its cut. He had wanted to avoid this. "Your wagon is fixed," Elias said, his voice gentle. "You can get to Oregon now. That was your plan." "We don't have to go to Oregon," Tom said. "We just had to go somewhere, away from where we were." "Your sister deserves a better life than this," Elias said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "She's young. She should have a chance at something easier." The boy took a step into the room. His small frame seemed to hold an impossible amount of dignity. "Clara May ain't looking for easy," he said, his voice clear and strong. "She's looking for good. This place is good. You're a good man." Elias stared at the boy, out of the mouths of babes. The simple, unvarnished truth of it silenced all the complex arithmetic in his head. Easy versus good. He had been so focused on the hardships, on the numbers, that he had forgotten to measure the value of things. The value of decency, the value of a shared meal, the value of a quiet, steady presence in a lonely world. He looked past Tom through the open kitchen door and saw her. Clara May was in the yard, splitting kindling for the morning fire. She moved with an easy, practiced grace. Each swing of the axe was efficient and sure. She was not a fragile thing to be protected from hardship. She was a force of nature in her own right. She was strong. She was capable. She was good. He looked at the single coffee cup he had set out for himself. He looked at the silent, empty chairs around his kitchen table. And he looked back at the woman in the yard, the woman who had brought the scent of baking bread and the sound of a second heartbeat back into his home. The arithmetic of doubt was a liar. It was a coward's excuse. The only truth that mattered was standing right in front of him, in the clear eyes of a 10-year-old boy and the steady swing of an axe in the hands of the woman he was already starting to love. He decided not to be practical. He decided to walk across the yard anyway. He poured the boiling water into the coffee pot and walked out the door, leaving Tom standing in the kitchen. He crossed the yard, the damp earth cool beneath his boots. Gus trotted along beside him, his tail giving a slow, hopeful thump. She heard him coming and stopped, resting the axe on the chopping block. She looked at him, her expression guarded, waiting. He stopped a few feet from her. He didn't have any pretty words. He had never been a man for them. All he had was the plain truth. "I'm not a rich man, Clara May," he began, his voice low and steady. "This ranch, some years it's a fight to hold on to it. The winters are hard, the work is endless. There will be more lean times than fat ones." He paused, taking a breath. "And I'm an old man. I'm set in my ways. My heart's been broken once, and I don't know if it ever truly mended." He looked her straight in the eye, holding nothing back. "This is not an easy life. I'm just a poor rancher." He had laid it all out. The truth, the hardship, the arithmetic of his age and his poverty. He was giving her one last chance to walk away, to choose the easier road. She looked at him, and the guarded expression on her face melted away, replaced by a soft, luminous smile that seemed to light up the entire morning. She took a step closer to him, her gaze never leaving his. She reached out and gently touched his arm, her fingers warm against his worn shirt. She whispered, "Then I'll be a poor rancher's wife." The world seemed to stop. The morning sun broke over the top of the mountains, flooding the valley with golden light. The simple words, spoken so softly, were the most profound thing he had ever heard. They were an acceptance not just of a proposal he hadn't even managed to speak, but of him, of the hardship, of the struggle, of the broken pieces and the calloused hands. She was not looking for easy. She was looking for good. He reached out and took her hand, his rough fingers lacing through hers. He didn't have to say anything else. She knew. They were married 3 days later by the circuit preacher in town. It was a simple ceremony, with Tom and Mr. Albright as their witnesses. The town of Harmony buzzed with gossip, of course. The old widower and the young orphan girl, they did the arithmetic. They whispered about foolishness and impropriety. But Elias didn't care. Let them count. He was learning a different kind of math. When they walked out of the small church, Mr. Albright shook his hand firmly. "She's a good one, Elias," he said, his eyes surprisingly kind. "You hold on to her." "I plan to," Elias said. Life on the Thorn Ranch changed. It did not get easier. The work was still hard, the winters still long, but it was no longer empty. The house filled with the sound of laughter, Tom's voice growing deeper by the month, Clara May's, a low, gentle melody that became the soundtrack to his days. She worked alongside him, her strength and spirit a constant source of wonder to him. She learned the rhythms of the ranch as if she had been born to them. She was not just his wife, she was his partner in everything. The ranch began to thrive, not because the land had changed, but because the people working it had. There was a hope in the soil now, a purpose in the work that had been missing for so long. 2 years later, they were standing by that same fence line, the one where he had first seen her broken-down wagon. The sun was setting, painting the sky in strokes of orange and pink. Clara May was standing beside him, her head resting on his shoulder. In her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, was their son, Samuel. He looked down at the tiny, sleeping face, at the small tuft of dark hair. A new life, not subtraction, not even addition. It was multiplication. It was a miracle. He put his arm around his wife, pulling her and their son closer. The air was cool, but he felt nothing but warmth. He remembered the lonely man who had stood in this very spot, a man who had stopped expecting anything from life, a man who had believed his story was over. He had been wrong. His story was just beginning. Clara May looked up at him, her eyes shining with a love that still humbled him. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. "The arithmetic," he said. She smiled, a knowing, gentle smile. "Did you ever figure it out?" "I did," he said, leaning down to kiss her. It was never about the numbers. It was about the value. And as he held his family close, with his dog at his feet and his home behind him, Elias Thorne finally understood. The world will tell you to count the years. It will tell you to measure the distance between two people, to calculate the odds, to do the sensible, practical arithmetic. It is a language of fear, a way to keep you safe in your solitude, but the heart speaks a different language. It does not count years, it counts moments of kindness. It does not measure wealth in dollars, but in shared laughter and quiet comfort. It understands that the value of a person is not in their age or their prospects, but in the goodness of their character and the strength of their soul. The story of Elias and Clara May is not about a man saving a woman or a woman saving a man. It is the story of two people who were brave enough to ignore the world's cold arithmetic and listen instead to the warm, quiet truth of their own hearts. It is a story that reminds us that sometimes the most courageous thing a person can do is to stop expecting the worst and allow themselves to hope for the best. It is the simple, profound lesson that a home is not a place you find, but a place you build together out of love and work and the unwavering belief in each other's worth. Thank you for your time and attention. It is the most valuable thing you have, and the fact that you share it here with me is something I will never take for granted. It is you, the listener, who keeps this channel, this small fire in the digital darkness, alive and burning. I hope you carry a little of its warmth with you into your day. Until next time, be good to yourselves and to each other.